Life in the Philippines. I'm apologize that there's no video, but just listen to what I have to say. These Filipinos really, really get on my nerves. Um, every time you ask them a question, you got to ask 5 times. I'm going to use the example of the way they are. There's something seriously wrong with these people. I was at a restaurant and they had some desserts that were brownies, cookies, and other items. And I said, "How much is the cookie?" And I was pointing at the cookie. And the guy says, "We sell cookies, we sell brownies, we sell cheesecake. We sell cheesecake by the slice. You could buy the whole cheesecake. The brownies are dark chocolate." And I was like, "I just want to know the price of the cookie." You understand what I mean? And that wasn't the only thing that happened, but this is the way these people are. You ask them a question and they don't answer it. Another example is you'll say, "Do you have Coke? Coca Cola?" And they'll answer, "We have Sprite, we have Pepsi, we have 7 Up, we have Orange, we have Grape, we have Fanta, we have Royal Crown, we have Sorry, Sorry, we have Canada Dry, we have Coke Diet, we have Coke Light, we have Coke Zero, we have Pepsi Max, and yes, we have Coke." They always talk like this. They're insane people. They're never you ask them any question and they're always take the longest path to get there. Another example was like last week. I went to a place and said, "What food do you sell?" And he says, "We have coffee, we have tea, we have iced tea, we have milk, we have chocolate milk." And I'm like, "I want to know what food you have." And I'm like, you really get annoyed. You know what the answer was? Snacks was the answer. So I had to ask him again. I had to say, "What food do you have?" And then he pretended that he already told me, and it was like cake, pastries, cupcakes was the food that they had. So this is very, very common in the Philippines. Either you get no answer, or they give you the strangest answers possible. And I'm going to use another example. I'm chatting with this girl online. She says, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from New York." She says, "Are you in BOGO?" I said, "Yes." And she's confused. She said, "I don't understand. I'm confused. Are you in BOGO, New York?" "No, I'm in BOGO. It's in town next to you. You're in the next town over. You know where BOGO is." They just cannot have a normal conversation. And I get this all the time. To be from somewhere means that you left, it usually means you left that place. And they know I'm a foreigner. I tell them I'm a foreigner. You know I'm a foreigner. My photos are of that of a foreigner. I come from somewhere else. And you get into discussions about how I came from somewhere and I currently live somewhere. And I know what she's going to do next. She's going to ask who I live with because they're obsessed with I must be living with a woman. That's what her next question is going to be. She's they don't get to the point with the questions. They don't get the point with the answers. And it's not just this that you got to deal with. Um, but these are some of the common ones. I think the most common one is asking them what drinks they have. You ask them if they have Coca Cola, and then they just list everything else. And then they say the Coca Cola last. And it's really annoying when they do that. And for example, with the brownies, I had to ask the guy like 5 or 6 times, "Is this one dark chocolate?" Because it looks different than the other ones. And it took like 5 times, and I had to ask like 3 people before. So all he said was, "I don't know why it's a different color," but he never answered the question. I said, "Is this dark chocolate?" And he said he points to a different one, and he said, "This one over here is dark chocolate. We use dark chocolate in our brownies." Yeah, but I want to know if this one is dark chocolate. And like I said, 3 people came over. They each took turns answering, and eventually he said, "I don't know why it's a different color," which to me means it's dark chocolate. They just can't say no, it's not. Another example was I wanted to buy a starter. I was interested in buying a starter relay because according to ChatGPT, I put in the diagnostics for my motorcycle. It starts when I turn off the starter. You hit the starter and it doesn't start. You release it and then it starts. It says the starter relay is the problem. So I go and I say, I went on the internet. It says if you release the starter and it starts, the problem is the starter relay. She says you don't have a starter relay. So then I went over and I pointed to it and I said, "What's this?" And the guy says it's the starter relay, right? So finally, we establish that the starter relay is in the motorcycle. And I say to the woman, "What's the price for a starter relay?" She says, "You don't need a starter relay." No, I want to know what the price is for the starter. You don't need a starter relay. I want to know what the price is for the starter. The problem is not your starter relay. Listen, just tell me the price for the starter relay. I want to know the price for the starter relay. She told me it was 280 pesos, which is $5. I could have gotten it, paid the $5, and I know it's not the original, the one that I have. But you know what? After I did all the fixing with everything else, I don't have the problem anymore. But I probably still need a starter relay. But it proves the point that when you ask them for something, you got to ask again and again and again, and they just don't answer the question. Another example was I am a photographer and I needed to buy clothing, and this woman owns like hundreds of dresses for her kids. That's where she spends all of her money. She buys fancy dresses, and some of them are nice because they're the traditional Filipino clothing. And I was like, I could film with that. Maybe I could film that and make some money. So I say to her, "Do you know where?" I send it in a text message. "Do you know where I can buy dresses?" And you know what she responds? She responds, "Yes." And that's it. And it's like, I'm not asking because I'm inquiring if you have the knowledge. I'm asking because I want you to tell me where I can buy dresses. And after she said that, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna drop it. Not that serious about buying it. Sometimes I go on the internet to the shopping websites and I look at clothing, but not that often, right? But that's the point that I'm making. They're so difficult to talk to that it's extremely frustrating when dealing with anything. Ordering food is when you're going to interact with them the most. And the women are very bossy. I remember I was looking to buy some clothing, and the woman was bringing some of the ugliest clothes. And I kept saying, "I don't like that. I don't like that color." I'm a guy. You can guess what color I'm going to wear. The guess is going to be navy blue. She was bringing this ugly brown and ugly green that looks like it got rejected from every other store. And no matter how many times I told her I don't want this ugly clothing, she kept bringing the same thing. I said, "Miss, look at what I'm looking at. This is what I'm looking for." And they just won't listen. So I believe that they have serious cognitive issues based on talking to them, the way they behave. They're very petty. They're very childish in general. Even the adults, they like to give the FU and all that, and they prejudge very quickly. So they have serious problems, and you don't know it until you experience it. It took me years to understand that this is a chronic issue. Either they're doing it because they hate foreigners and they just want to annoy us. They like try and knock you off your high horse. Like they think that you're better than they are, so they try to not cooperate with you. Or it's because they've got serious cognitive problems. Whatever it is, I know that they're very petty. So that's my opinion. Please don't say, "Well, why don't you leave the country?" Because I have nowhere else to go. Anywhere I go, it's going to be the same stuff. I've been to enough cities, I've been to enough countries. It's the same everywhere. Over here, it just happens to be worse because they kind of speak English.